Hi, and welcome to our interview for this week. And I'm thrilled to have with me today an old friend, Emma CRAWFORD-FALEKAONO from Ignition. Good day to you.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Splendid. It's great to have you with us, Emma. For people that haven't come across you in Ignition, tell us a little bit about your world.
Yeah, sure. So Ignition, as we're now known, you probably would have noticed there's been a bit of a rebrand recently, which we can talk about later on if we want to. It's basically the world's first client engagement and commerce platform for professional services. So we focus on that relationship that you build with your clients, not just when you first engage them, but the ongoing relationship as well, and then how we can automate that relationship, make it the best experience for your client and for yourself. Personally, I head up the EMEA team, which is super exciting. I am an escaped accountant for my sins. So I stopped practicing around 10 years ago now, but been in the industry with senior leadership roles at Xero over in New Zealand, and then moved back to the UK to take this role with Ignition in 2020, which was terrible timing with the pandemic. But still lots of fun. I'm glad I moved back.
Well, I'm a former high school maths teacher, and I observe from afar how much the teaching game has changed. Has the accountancy world changed since you left the ranks?
Oh, honestly, Rob, it's like chalk and cheese. And one of the things that people always say to me is, coming from particularly a smaller country population wise, like New Zealand, and obviously that's where cloud accounting software was born with Xero, or the way that we've come to know it now, and the way that other cloud accounting softwares or fintech have developed since that. It was born in New Zealand all those years ago. So, and people always say to me, oh, does it feel like, the UK is so much further behind New Zealand? And I would actually say, no, it's not like that at all. We just have very unique, I guess, challenges with the way the industry is run here. And a lot of that is to do with the size of our industry versus, like New Zealand, for example. But definitely going away and coming back, there was some shocks. I always tell people, like, when I moved back, and I'd kept one bank account going because I'm a British citizen, so I didn't want to cut all ties, but opening up bank accounts and getting mortgages and things like that when we came back over to the UK, it just seemed very old-fashioned. Like, I was asked if I wanted a checkbook. I couldn't tell you the last time I'd used cash, even when I was like, it's very much a cashless society in New Zealand, and to come back and be offered a checkbook and be told no, if you want to get a taxi, you need cash, because actually a lot of them still don't take card. It was quite mind-blowing, and that obviously then has the roll-on effect to the industry, because as accountants, we don't want to necessarily I guess isolate ourselves or pigeonhole ourselves to work with only certain type of clients, unless that's our strategy and our plan in our firm. So I guess it does mean that we are a bit bulkier, a bit bigger. I mean, but the adoption of technology is huge from when I left to now. I think one of the big things for me is when I left, because I moved to New Zealand because of the role with Xero. No one knew what Xero was. No one really knew what. Everyone thought, oh, you're just going to be an accountant, right? But in New Zealand, so it's like, no, I'm going into fintech, and people kind of looked at me funny. Whereas now coming back, you see it everywhere. You see all of the big fintech companies advertising on primetime TV slots with TVCs. You see them on billboards. Everyone who is in the industry now is at least aware of your top 3 players, whereas before it was very much not like that.
So you say industry a lot. Do you see it as an accounting industry or an accounting profession and a fintech industry?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I do see it as an industry, and I see it as more of like an accounting and bookkeeping industry together, which is probably quite, could be, I guess, controversial to some.
What makes it an industry, Emma?
I think for me, it's because of it's more than just the individual profession and the day-to-day engagement, for example, between an accountant who's, in the accounting profession and is a chartered accountant or a non-chartered or a bookkeeper, and their client. Is so much more than that, right? What makes it an industry is for them to be able to have that touch points. They have to depend on fintech, or they choose to depend on fintech, and they choose to gather, build up those connections, that network around them to be able to benefit their client. It's no longer okay, I'm going to go and see my accountant, so I'm going to walk into, a high street accounting firm, sit down, and we're going to get a calculator out and a pen and paper and our old work papers, and then we're going to physically sign. So I think for me, what makes it an industry is there's a dependency on technology, there's a dependency on other people, and there's also a cross collaboration between bookkeepers, accountants, people who are in industry, finance, banking, all
I
of
get
the
that.
government. Yeah.
You've argued that pretty well. I understand that.
What would you say?
Well, when you talk to accountants who have sweated blood and tears to get their qualifications, they like to generally see themselves on a par with lawyers and doctors and those kind of people. So they would claim to be professional and thus be part of a profession. But when we speak to people on the show from all over the world, particularly in North America, they see it as an industry. They don't really call it a profession. Perhaps in the UK, we're a little bit more snobbish and would deem it to be a profession. I'm only a part qualified accountant, so I don't really have a say in it. But for the sake of good order, as we say here in Britain, we call it a professional just to keep some cohort of it happy. But whatever we call it, we can't deny that there's been a lot of change and a lot of disruption over the last few years, not just through COVID, but the sheer pace of change of technology. Do you want to speak into that a little bit? What have you observed?
Yeah, I think observations have been very much, I mean, I find this a really exciting time. So I was talking to someone the other day, and they'd actually done some market research, and I'm not going to mention too much about that because it's not my work and I don't want to steal their thunder.
Will it come out in the public domain at some point?
It will do, yes.
Okay.
It will come from Iris.
Okay, good to know.
But, they've got some really great market research that they've done there, and they're looking at prior to COVID, during the pandemic, and then post the pandemic, and the way that firms see themselves when it comes to utilizing technology. So they use certain terminology. Again, it's not, I don't want to take the wind out of their sails. It's very much their work. But they did speak about this recently on their roadshow that they've done around the UK, and seeing the shift now of people's thought process of where, and remember, it's going to be very subjective when you're going to talk about your own firm, right? So you're always going to be thinking, okay, well, no, I want to be one of those early adopters. No, I want to be, a fully digitalized practice. And you never want to call someone else's baby ugly either. It was interesting to see the percentages of people that would call their firm fully digitalized versus people who said, yeah, we're getting there. Like, we might have, for example, bookkeeping software to automate some of those manual tasks, but we've still got a way to go. And then you had people that were very much kind of, no, we're happy, we're set in our ways, we're okay with desktop software. That's still software, like it's still technology. We're happy with doing it how we were and doing manual processes. Now, the shift that they'd shown was quite significant in the fact that, obviously, as we would expect, due to the pandemic, right? All of a sudden, our hands were forced. We had to be able to work anywhere, anytime, on any device, and have the flexibility as well. And also the ability to be able to do that work in an efficient way, because our clients needed us more than ever. And I'm saying us because I've still got my accountant. I'm an accountant at heart. But they did really need us more than ever, right? So it was all of a sudden, okay, well, we need to adapt. And what we're doing is we're surviving. We're making sure our clients survive. Whereas now, why I think it's so exciting is because by doing that, what it's done is it's shifted a lot of firms that were maybe on the more of the, no, we're happy how we are, it's working, maybe the desktop side, or we'll get to it. Like, we do want to digitalize, but we've got, like a 5, 6, 7 year plan. We'll get there when we can. It forced their hand. So now out the other end, what we've got is a lot of firms, yes, there's been some moved up to now calling themselves fully digitalized, but a lot of the firms now are saying we're sitting in that middle ground. And we're not sure whether, we've survived. So does thriving now mean that we have to go fully digitalized? Mm-hmm. Or, what's the next catastrophe that's going to happen? How do we future-proof in other ways as well, not just looking at technology? So I think that's been the biggest shift, I would say, from pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic, is just there's been a significant movement, again, in the industry, when we're talking about firms, of going along that technology adoption journey. But rather than, as we've always seen us moving across that technology adoption journey, we're actually doing it in bulk. So the industry is doing it in bulk. We've seen, these late majority, for example, really having to move a bit quicker.
Sure. There's no doubt we've seen an acceleration of adoption of change in accounting firms. My question now is, who's driven that agenda? Because we hear of the vendors pushing the digital agenda. We hear clients now saying to their accounting advisors, hey, we need this, this, and this. We want to be in the cloud. We want this kind of advice. Or is it the accounting firms themselves that have woken up to say, hey, our old model of Excel spreadsheets and checkbooks and the old ways of doing things on paper is not working. We need to digitalize. Who's driving the change?
Do you know what? I genuinely think it's a multifaceted approach. Like, yes, the vendors have been talking about it for years, but also as a vendor, we've got our own intent, right? We need to. We're running a business ourselves, and yes, we're providing value, but we're always going to have that narrative, and regardless of whether or not, well, we've seen it does work, right? We've got the proof, but we're always going to kind of sing that, adopt the technology now, do it quickly, do it fast. This is what you need. So there is an element of that, which is kind of, probably got the ball rolling a lot more. You're always going to have, I guess what we call early adopters, or the accountants that are always looking for change, like they just thrive on it. Quite often you'll see, it might be younger, or it could be anyone, to be honest. But so you do get the drive from the accountants themselves. Of course, the clients, especially over the pandemic, it was the clients that really kind of said, we need this help. We need to be able to, still work with you over the likes of video call, and we need to be able to e-sign things. We need to do things via email, etc. So, and we need to do it efficiently. So definitely the clients. And also with the clients piece, even pre-pandemic, what you were finding is just in general, the world was becoming more accepting outside of the industry as well. With the use of technology, we're more accepting of entrepreneurial thought process. We're more encouraging of people going out on their own. Like, we have this, whether it's right or wrong, this kind of hustle mentality that's really come to fruition over the last 10 years.
Yes.
In different generations. So them as clients as well, they're creating their own businesses, which means, there's more clients for firms to be able to service out there, but these clients then come with the expectation that they can work a certain way with accountants. And because they're using technology to run their business, they want to be able to use technology to be able to work with their accountant as well. So that was definitely a big piece. The bit that I'm going to call out that you didn't mention there as well, Rob, is, and I think is really changing it, is new people coming up through the profession.
Okay. The younger generation.
Yeah, definitely. And this makes me feel really old now saying this. I'm at that point in life where I can say, the younger generation.
Of course.
But yeah, again, there's expectations. And this is probably back in the day, one of the reasons why I was tempted to leave the accounting industry as an accountant, or the accounting profession, let's say, because, I loved working with clients. I loved the consultative approach. I loved helping businesses thrive. But to get to that point, even though there was technology out there at this stage, there was still an expectation that you would do X amount of years, even after, qualifying. And there was still an expectation that you had to learn everything manually. And there was still an expectation that you had to, earn your stripes, rather than allowing people that were, say better with people. And I remember having a story once, and I wasn't in a firm like this, and in a big firm like this, there was one of my peers who I went to university with who was saying they were not allowed to pick up the phone to speak to a client until the end of their second year of their training. And stuff like that, it can put people off. And
yep, let's chain you to a desk for 10 to 15 years and you might make partner if you're lucky.
Exactly. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that's how it is. And you know what, actually, sometimes that is still happening. It definitely was pre-pandemic. So I think the profession and the industry had to change as well, because we want to keep the talent, and firms need to keep their talent. When I do a lot around lean efficiency and stuff, and one of the biggest I guess, or the most inefficient practices that you can have is underutilized talent.
Sure.
So I think that's really shifted.
How have the vendors in tech and software themselves changed? Because there's such a fast moving pace of technology, as we've alluded to, but we're seeing different strategies from vendors. Yeah. Some are making the accountants the hero of the story. Some are marginalizing them and trying to get to the data and the clients directly. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And, there's definitely not a one size fits all. I think it depends the offering that you're giving. It depends, who your ideal customers are as well. So as an example, I can just talk from an Ignition point of view. We're very much, customer centric, customer focused. Are we adding value? For us, it's more about product led growth. So, if we're giving people what they need and we're adding value and we're making their life easier and we're making that connection between why not? It's going to sound cheesy now, Rob, but we're igniting that spark.
Okay. See what you did there.
Yes. With the excitement and the energy of, that client accountant or client bookkeeper, client professional relationship. It's almost like there isn't really like that is the foundation of everything we do. However, like you say, looking then at, if you're looking at maybe bookkeeping software, there's so many different strategies. So, and it depends where in the world you are, which is something that I've noticed, and even within similar software. So it could be the fact that, like you say, they're championing and partnering with the accountant, which actually means it's a selling through channel, right? Yeah. So I think there's no right or wrong. I think as long as people are, or businesses are approaching it with the good, like with goods, like the greater goods as an end goal, so business gets easier to be done and it's helping and it's a solution, then I think it's interesting to see all of the different approaches. I've not seen, I don't think anyone's ever nailed it.
Talk to us about the M&A activity in the industry, because mergers and acquisitions, we're seeing it a lot with accounting firms. We're seeing it with the vendors. We're starting to see it with accounting firms merging with fintech and software vendors. We're starting to see private equity and venture capital money coming in. You know about that at Ignition. You've had a big injection of cash, which has taken you to another level. So talk to us about how the fintech and software industry is handling all of that.
Do you know what? I find this really intriguing. It's almost like the floodgates have opened over the last couple of years. And again, I don't know, do you think that would be potentially related to the pandemic? What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
Who knows? We talk a lot, Martin Bissett and I, on the news of various acquisitions that have taken place. Some of them are a little off the charts, like Intuit and MailChimp.
Yeah.
And so we know things are going on. We then analyze the news and say, here's what it means to you accounting practitioners. Here's why you should take notice of this. But certainly there's a lot of consolidation, a lot of movement, and a lot of M&A activity. So I don't know, one big box suite that does it all, or a best-in-class variety of applications that will do it for you. All of these arguments come into play, don't they?
Yeah, I think what we're going to end up with is more down the second route. So we've got a best-in-class box of applications. So I find it really interesting because you look at a couple of the recent ones. So Accountancy Manager as an example, and Centre.
Yeah, with Bright Group, yeah.
So that they're really good examples, right? So Centre and Accountancy Manager, we both know what part of the industry they play in. So it's really interesting that we've got two bigger groups then acquiring similar I guess products. Or not, It's not the same product, you know what I mean, but similar solutions, like playing in the same part of the market. So for me, I mean, from a vendor perspective, likewise with look at Xero, there was very, very little M&A action whilst I was there, and it was just starting to kick off, I think, a year and a half after I left, as we really started turning into that, the more of the corporate global entity, because again, it gets to a stage where you can't build for everything. And that's where we sit within that technology world. You can't build for everything. No matter how much injection of cash you've got, you can't tick every box. So when it makes sense to make those right M&A I guess calls.
Sure.
I also don't want to go too much into some of it, but like for me, what's interesting, and you called this out as well, is seeing accountancy firms starting to merge, like smaller accountancy firms. So it's always very much been there's an acquisition of a bigger one, or maybe there's been like two large ones from a group that have decided to break away and merge into one. Like it makes sense. But what I'm seeing now more and more of is on the smaller end of the scale, small to medium sized practices starting to buy out other small to medium sized practices. And I think a lot of that goes back to that the discussion that I kind of called out around, the next generation. And so we do have these in the UK, especially, like we have a lot of kind of sole traders, or maybe, two partner firms, like also two partner firms down to sole traders, where they're at the stage where they're on the cusp of retiring. Do they really want to go through the pain of a full transformation, or is it easier just to kind of sell out and let someone else do that? And the people that are buying, or the people that are acquiring these firms, have seen, because if they've gone through that transformation themselves, they've seen how profitable it can be to take a firm like that with a really good client book, and really good services, and the loyalty and the credibility as well that a lot of these firms have, and be able to just make small tweaks, even if that's putting it through a different process or putting it through a different technology system, and seeing like really quickly the huge increase on margin that they can be getting. So
yeah, it's all going on. It's all going on. Yeah. And speaking of all going on, it was Practice Ignition and now it's Ignition. How's the rebrand gone for you and what was the thinking behind it? Because you were involved in that, weren't you?
Yes, most definitely. And it was quite interesting actually, because we were going to, this is a little behind the scenes insight, we were going to launch the rebrand towards the end of last year. And we ended up pushing it back. And I'm telling everyone it's because we were waiting for me to come back from maternity leave. Because the day I came back is the day we launched it. That's rubbish. Of course, it wasn't that. But
like
it was,
you have that kind of power, Emma.
I wish. No, but it was great to still be able to, because again, it's been literally 12 months worth of the whole branding work, but 5 years worth of the product work that kind of has got us to this position where, you know, the product is a star. We've got customer advocacy now across the globe. You know, we've identified different areas to continue to help the customer, so payments being one of it, revenue management being a side as well. And it just made sense for us to, you know, we've grown up as a business, we've expanded, we had a really good Series B, and that's when I joined after the Series B. And it just made sense with the numbers that we were seeing, with the footprint that we had, and with the product that we had. We needed to grow up as a brand as well, like we had been growing up as a business. So it's very much for me, like when we hit Series B, that's when we went from startup to scale up. Now we're very much established kind of scale up to mature in business, and always, you know, but continuing to grow. And we still got that fun, exciting side, which is that fast-paced scale.
And you mentioned earlier about automating relationships with your platform. Can you really automate relationships? Because people might think they're personal, it's about the people. You can't automate something like that.
Yeah, well, no, see, I to me, it's not necessarily automate. Like you don't need to tie automation in with, okay, you know, it's no longer personable, because of that to me is, you know, that's not two different things.
You mean so something different, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it, so what's the difference? And I'm putting this into a really basic form. If I was going to have that outlook, I'd be thinking, well, what's the difference then with me walking over to my device and pressing play on a button, rather than me saying, hey Google, can you play X song? So yeah, it's just for me, automation and being personable, like it doesn't have to be two separate things. So when I think about, you know, voice controls that we have maybe around our homes now, that doesn't make it any less personal. In fact, I'd probably argue the opposite. If I'm asking, you know, Siri or someone to go and turn my lights on, rather than me walking over and pressing a cold wall switch. So it's the same with that relationship between your prospects and your clients, and you as their trusted advisor. So having the technology, it doesn't replace the personal relationship and the trust that you have with that client. For me, it actually makes it stronger. So it gives visibility as a first one. So when you're looking at Ignition, things such as, you know, being able to clearly see engagement letters on your desktop, being able to sign it, being able to, you know, have that platform for you to communicate with your customer or your prospect without having for them to travel each time and put a couple of pounds in the parking meter to park up and then see you, and then they've got to take time off work. Like, there's a big difference. So it's all about, for me, it's all about how you can build in automation to make sure that the client experience is the best for them, whilst it's also working and maximizing your output as a firm.
Nicely coined. We get that. You're a strong female voice in the industry. I know you have a part to play on that. You feel it's a crusade of yours. We did an interview just recently with Professor Anton Lewis. He's a vanguard of Black accounting, and we talked a lot about disenfranchised minorities and prejudiced groups. Women came into the conversation. There are not many in the accounting and fintech. Give us your thoughts on women in accountancy and fintech, those kind of awards, and how that's all playing out, Emma.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm not going to, but I could sit here talking to you for hours on this. I really
I know it's a passion of yours, and it should be.
Yeah, definitely. Look, We have come a long way as an industry. When I compare before I left, like 10 years ago, to coming back into the UK, we have come a long way in the right direction with regards to all biases that are involved in this industry, but not just in the industry, in the general population, and they're reflected then in the industry. We still have a hell of a long way to go. And I see this all the time. And the way that I best put it when I'm looking at the UK accounting and bookkeeping industries is, yes, there are strong, intelligent, successful leaders and business owners within the industry. What you will find is they're normally down the lower, the smaller end of firms and bookkeeper companies. And the reason being is because normally they've started up in one of the bigger end companies, but they haven't got the flexibility that they need. So they've got all of the talent, they've got all of the ability, they've got the experience, but actually maybe they've gone and they've had children, or, you know, they've got something else in their life that's also a priority. And then we're seeing like this influx of you know, senior executive women doing their own thing and starting their own businesses because it gives them the life balance that they need. And as much as, you know, taking nothing away from men and parents of any type, unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunately, just it's life. The most I guess, when you're looking at bringing children up as an example, the duty of care does mainly fall on the mother. Just the fact, you know, just even the 9 months of you growing them, if that's the way that you've gone about having children. So it's an interesting one. Like, I'm definitely seeing more support within the industry, a lot more allies. So like yourself, Rob and Martin, as an example, I know you feel, you know, you ally a lot of with a lot of minorities as well. So yeah, I think it's we're doing something, but we're getting there. And as part of that, right, that's one of the reasons why we've been now 5 years celebrating women in accounting through the Ignition Women in Accounting Awards. So our entries have just closed for that. I'm on the judging panel this year, and I've already started judging through the first batch, and I'm blown away. Like, I literally had to have my box of tissues next to me, and it was just amazing, just seeing the story and some of the adversity, but also like how people have gone through that adversity and raised others, and ensured that that's not impacted others, and put a stop to it, and called out, you know, these biases that along the theme of #breaking the bias. So sure. Yeah, it's a really good initiative. I'm privileged to be on the judging panel, but I think as an industry we've got a long way to go, and we just need to continue talking about it and breaking down the barriers, and, you know, normalizing the fact that it's an issue, and we're going to work towards it as a team.
Keep on rolling with that. Anton Lewis said at the conclusion of his interview about Blacks and minorities in accounting that the best thing we can do is keep talking, because the more talking, it creates change, and it changes prejudices and gets over the stale, male and pale type heritage of accounting and even fintech. So it's great what you're doing. Just in closing, Emma, we'll put your contact details in the show notes. You're a great partner of the show. It's great to have Ignition on board with us. Tell us what's coming up for Ignition over the next year or two.
Oh my gosh, so there is so much coming out. Obviously, we've had our new branding that's been rolled out, so we're really just, you know, riding off the momentum of that. We've got lots of events coming up that we're going to be at, so anyone heading to Accountex, I'll be seeing you there. We've got workshops that we're doing with partnership with partners across the year, and the best thing is we've already grown our team, and I'm about to start another round of hiring as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get out on the road and actually start seeing more people now. Finally, we're allowed to, and we're not all locked away.
Yes. And in terms of Ignition as a brand, what would accounting practitioners listening to the show, and we've got almost 25,000 of them in the UK and the US, what kind of things might they be asking themselves that would warrant a conversation with somebody from Ignition?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, actually. For me, it's more around, you know, if you're thinking about how you can, I'm using the word automate, but how you can make it easier to win clients, and how you can make it easier to continue engaging with your valued customers. If you want some insights and what works and how Ignition can help you do that, then I'd reach out and just have a chat. Again, no obligation. You could start a trial. And likewise, on the other side of that, one of the big things that we've seen, which is why, you know, there was such a demand increase across the pandemic, is, you know, with your valued clients, or with all of your clients, you know, being able to then bill and collect the revenue utilizing this one system. Again, if you wanted to get paid easily or easier, come and have a chat to us as well.
Yeah, sounds great. And in closing, what's coming up for the accounting industry? You talked about what's happening in fintech and for the vendors. What should they be mindful of? Because they've been through a lot of changes. The more of it coming, or will things calm down a little bit? What's your predictions?
So I think we're at that tipping point. So as I said, I feel like we've had that pressure put onto us to maybe move a bit quicker when it comes to changes. I think what we're at now is people in firms in the industry can either go left and continue on that change management and that continuous cycle of improvement, or people will identify a different goal that maybe isn't along that improvement and that growth line, that they're going to go down that route as well. So I think we could potentially see a bit of a split in the two choices there. So people that are going to ride the wave, the momentum, the continuous, the change piece, or people who are going to say, actually, I'm happy with where I'm at, but I'm going to focus on this because this is what my goal is. Exciting times, huh? Definitely, yeah. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really looking forward to summer as well.
Yeah, well, Emma Crawford-FALEKAONO from Ignition, it's been so great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your passion and your insights.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. It's been a real pleasure.
You've been watching or listening to the Accounting Influencers podcast featuring hosts Rob Brown and Martin Bissett, with key interviews, what's working in the accounting profession, and news from the accounting and fintech world that helps you do your jobs better. We go out to 144 countries, over 20,000 unique listeners with 100,000 downloads, and it is accredited for continued professional education and development. Thank you for tuning in.